afternoon Pacific time, and this is the time and place set for the special meeting of the Nevada Taxi Cab Authority Board. The first item of business on our agenda is call to order, and since I can't see you, I'm going to take roll orally. Member Thompson?
Member Thompson is here.
Member Rodriguez?
Member Rodriguez is here.
Member Soderberg?
Member Soderberg is here.
And I, Dan Reeser, am also here, so we have the full board in attendance. I'm going to dispense with the Pledge of Allegiance since we do not have a readily available mechanism to conduct that that ritual, but not by reason of it not being important. Just the WebEx context doesn't allow us to do that effectively. Secretary Moran, has this meeting been properly posted in accordance with the open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. The next item of business is public comment pursuant to the Nevada open meeting law. This is an opportunity that we give to the general public who would like to bring matters to the attention of the board that are matters within our jurisdiction. And we ask to limit your comments to 3 minutes. I've only been advised of one public comment, and that is by Joyce Rose. Ms. Rose, if you're present and would like to address the board, we'd be happy to hear you.
Okay. You wish for me to tell my story?
Yeah, well, whatever you wanted to bring to the attention of the board.
Okay. All right. I called the cab on the 16th of this month, on Tuesday, I believe it was. I went to the doctor. I came out of the doctor's office, in front of the doctor's office, sat down on a bench with my cell phone and called the yellow cab company, which I had the number for. I gave them the address, and they took it, and I ordered the cab. This was 3:30 in the afternoon. By 4:15, nobody had shown up, and I was getting a little bit pressed because I knew it would be 5 o'clock. It would be dark, so of course I wanted to make sure they were on their way. I assumed when I called the cab company, they were going to say, we're on our way right now, they're almost there, blah, blah. When I called back, she told me my cab had been canceled. I said, who could have canceled my cab? She said, oh, it's canceled, you know. She said, do you want to order a cab? And I said, well, yes, please, I need a cab for sure. I sat there until almost 5 o'clock. It's almost getting dark. I'm in this parking lot all by myself. The medical center has been closed. There's nobody around. I'm 87 years old. I can hardly walk as it is. My cane was stolen to top everything off while I'm sitting there. So some young lady came along with her elderly father, and she said, I've seen you inside of the medical center a few hours ago. She said, oh, are you waiting for someone? Then I told her my story, and she offered me a ride home. Well, thank God for her. I don't know what would have happened to me if she hadn't taken me home, because what was I going to do? I could hardly walk. I didn't have my cane anymore, and the cab never showed up, and it's getting dark. I'm in a bad neighborhood. I couldn't get back in the medical center. They closed at 5 o'clock. So that's my sad story.
Well, Ms. Rose, thank you for bringing that to our attention, and I'll ask Administrator Decker if he would take under review that matter with Yellow Cab.
All right, I would appreciate it.
Is there any other member of the public who would like to provide comment at this time? Going once, going twice, going 3 times, hearing none, I will close public comment. Agenda item 3 is the time set for the interview of our next applicant for the administrator's position. And today we have Mr. Cummings, who, thank you, Mr. Cummings, you've been patiently awaiting. because of my board members' remote participation, I'm going to ask the board members if you have the questions and are prepared to ask the questions that you were assigned, or do you want me to ask all the questions? Member Thompson?
It does not matter. This is Member Thompson. It does not matter to me one way or the other. I have the questions, but you're certainly welcome to ask them yourself.
If you're there, if you've got them, that's good. How about you, Member Soderberg?
I do have the questions. I'm fine if it is easier for you to ask all of them because of the complexity of the teleconference, or I'm ready to go. They're in front of me and they're
Okay,
numbered.
great. Okay, and Member Rodriguez, how about you?
If Nancy could send them to me, I'd be glad to ask those questions.
Okay, just for efficiency wise, Member Rodriguez, if you don't mind, I'll ask your questions too.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
That's great. So, Mr. Cummings, thank you very much for being with us today. The board is going to be asking you some questions, and at the conclusion of the questions, then Administrator Decker will explain to you just briefly the process. Additionally, after your interview, we will be deliberating on all of the interviews we've conducted, and you are welcome to participate in, or not participate, but listen in on the deliberations if you wish. So the first question we have for you, Mr. Cummings, is could you give us your 3-minute elevator pitch on why you should be selected the administrator?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to interview. I think one of the things, or the best thing that makes me the best candidate, is a multitude of things. The transportation industry in general is kind of unique. I have extensive experience in the transportation industry, including the taxi cab industry. My last position encompassed what the NTA and Taxi Cab Authority does now. I have extensive experience in law enforcement, so I understand that side of it as well as the administrative piece and the government regulation piece of it. I have a lot of experience in rulemaking, legislative analysis, and fiscal note analysis. I understand trending as far as the transportation industry and what impacts consumer protection. I don't do anything that I don't ask my people that I supervise to do. So I've been out in below zero weather on kind of undercover operations for illegal operators. I've also done everything that my investigators did. So I started at the bottom and worked my way up. So I understand everything that comes along with the transportation industry, including the bridge that's built between local regulation and kind of federal regulation, and that crossover that exists between those and how it impacts. I also have experience in transportation network companies, which was a kind of unique piece of the pie a little while ago, a couple years ago. So I've done it all in transportation. Well, most of it. I don't want to say I've done it all, but I've done a lot of it. I've been in government a long time, so I understand the nuances of government and how to get things done, and how sometimes how long it takes to get things done, I guess would be a better way to put it.
Okay. Thank you. Member Thompson.
Well, this is a similar question. Which of your employment leadership positions do you consider best prepared you for the administrator's position, and why do you think so?
Well, I think my last position as the chief of investigation and compliance, our Public Utilities Commission, which is basically a combination of the NTA and Taxi Cab Authority. So I spent 9 years in that position. I've learned, I've gone through the FMCSA training to be a level 1 inspector for both commercial motor vehicles and passenger motor vehicles. I understand the transportation network industry as well. So I think that, as far as from a leadership and industry perspective, that's the position that prepared me most for this one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This question's on behalf of Member Rodriguez. What do you consider the biggest public safety challenges for an agency like the authority, and how will you address those challenges?
That's an easy one. The biggest risk to the agency is illegal operations. That's obviously from a consumer protection standpoint, that's the biggest risk to both the traveling public and an agency. How I would address that? Well, I think it first starts understanding the problem, finding the trends, and then addressing those through various means. I know in Nevada it's a lot more aggressive than it is here as far as illegal operations, but the enforcement is basically the same. So without understanding, how it occurs and where it occurs the most, it's hard to say, but the basic premise is to get out and to do enforcement. So that could be a uniformed presence, that could be an undercover presence, and that also comes down to a public perception as well, right? Getting that information out there as far as PSAs, as well as recent enforcement activities, so that the public understands that these things are occurring and that the agency is also addressing those.
Mr. Cummings, a kind of a follow-up clarification question, just for the public who are listening, because we're not in a public setting where they could look at the agenda binder. When you say here, what jurisdiction are you speaking to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Colorado.
No,
So, yeah,
if we were in a public, and if we were in the public hearing place, they could see your resume, but people don't have the benefit of that.
I apologize.
Member Soderberg. Don, I think you're on mute, maybe. Or did we lose you? Member Soderberg. Well, I'll go ahead and ask the question he had. His question was, walk us through instances where you have changed or improved an organization's work culture.
Well, that's a good question. I think when I first started at the Public Utilities Commission in Colorado, we had a big kind of knowledge drain, so to speak, with a lot of retirements that contributed to a lot of enforcement activities that weren't being conducted. To rebuild the unit, I think I went out and looked for specific people to hire with a broad range of law enforcement experience, but understood the balance between not being overly heavy-handed. And I think through, that's where it all began, was proper hiring. And then it was a matter of training those investigators and then trusting them, having them vested in the process and the mission that was happening. So, and trusting them to do their jobs. So I think that went a long way to adjust the culture of the organization, whereas before it was looked upon as maybe an organization that wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, because we were responsible for the entire state of Colorado, being based out of Denver. So the public perception of that was that we weren't getting out to the outlying areas on the western slope. And once we started doing that, I think the investigators found value in it and the public found value in it. So through that collaboration, it ended up being a better, because we were able to communicate better with the people that we regulated, as well as get information on illegal operations and things that were going on that we didn't have a handle on, or didn't have an optic on, because we were in the metro area. So that collaboration allowed my investigators to kind of, do what they needed to do and develop cases that they needed to develop, as well as getting out there and kind of that quasi-community policing aspect as well.
Thank you. Member Thompson.
Mr. Cummins, can you describe a career situation that presented unique challenges where you pursued a creative, let's say, out-of-the-box solution?
Well, I can speak to the transportation network company aspect when they first came into the state of Colorado. That required a lot of innovative thinking, and not from a regulatory standpoint, but without going into too much detail, what eventually happened is we ended up issuing a fine to one of the TNC companies for a large amount, over $1 million. And that was based on safety regulations that weren't being followed. And the ultimate goal was to get them to implement better safety aspects, right? And the fine wasn't necessarily a vehicle to do that. The fine was for what they did. But through that process, and I negotiated I was responsible in the unit that I was in for all the negotiations that happened. We were able to get the transportation network company to implement better safety strategies through a collaborative effort. You know, I was probably one of the first regulators to go to the Uber offices, corporate offices in San Francisco, and spend 3 days with them to understand their operation and what they could do. So they couldn't just come in and kind of give that quote unquote lip service of we can't do that. And through that effort and through that collaboration, they did implement a lot more safety aspects in their application, which I think you see across the country now. So that was probably the uniquest that I've ever had.
Thank you, Mr. Cummins.
You're welcome.
Mr. Cummings, what has been your biggest career disappointment?
Well, that's a tough question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. Disappointment, probably not making the biggest impact that I could in certain positions. I mean, that's always a career disappointment when you set out to do certain things and make a big impact, and oftentimes fall short of that just for various reasons. But from a personal perspective, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially coming from the background that I've come from. And, you know, you feel like you haven't succeeded fully. So I think that's followed, you know, that's all of my positions. And that happens for a variety of reasons. You know, there's not one reason that happens. It's just, you know, different roadblocks getting put into place. And sometimes it's hard to overcome those roadblocks to get to the next level.
Member Soderberg, are you back with us?
He has indicated to me through text that he can hear us, and he does not believe his phone is muted, but he, for some reason, we cannot hear him, which, so he has asked that you read his questions, although I'm not sure what we'll do when we get to the deliberation.
Yeah, me either. Okay, very good. Mr. Soderberg, or Member Soderberg's question is, what is your view of using progressive discipline in personnel matters, and in what situations do you believe this is a useful human resource management tool?
Yeah, progressive discipline is always useful, right? It never, there are some situations where you have to skip certain steps in the progression because of, you know, something that's happened. But my view on progressive discipline is that it starts out as a learning and corrective action at the same time, right? A learning tool, as well as a corrective piece at the same time, and then kind of graduates from there. So, you know, I believe in the progressive discipline model. I've had success with it before. And I think it's a useful tool. I do, like I said before, I think there are certain situations that you do have to skip steps because of things that have happened. But overall, I don't think there's anything that can't be fixed.
The next question's from Member Rodriguez. What is the most important skill set for a leader in a law enforcement agency?
Well, I think there's a couple, but the most important is probably trust. Right? The line personnel have to trust leadership, and leadership has to trust the line personnel. That's the only way that things get accomplished. Without trust, there's always dissent in any law enforcement agency. So if you've been in law enforcement for a while, you understand that that happens all the time, basically, for one reason or another. So that, to me, is the biggest piece of that, biggest characteristic of that.
Member Thompson.
Mr. Cummings, what is the greatest competitive challenge facing the taxi cab industry today? I know that this is a fairly difficult question, but it's a very important question.
Well, there's always competition. You know, the transportation industry is malleable in general. It changes all the time, and it has an influx of different type models all the time. So I think the industry in and of itself is malleable, right? So you saw the influx of the TNCs into the taxi cab world, which cuts down on bottom line. It also, it creates competition. So, it just depends. Right now, it's the pandemic and workforce issues. So, a couple months from now, it might be something else. It might be autonomous vehicles that come up and running. Illegal operations are another big one. That's, it's competitive in nature because it takes away from the taxi cab companies that are doing it correctly. So I don't think it's a question that can be answered with one specific thing. I think it's a combination of different things that could happen at any different time.
Yes, that does make sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Cummings, could you identify the 3 priorities you would have for leading the authority if you were selected the administrator?
Well, I think without knowing the organization fully, the 3 priorities would probably be illegal operations. That would be at the top of my list. The next priority would be the bridge building from an agency perspective to the regulated entities. And then I think the third one, which I think is vitally important as well, which is not really thought about, is the collaboration between interagencies. So the collaboration between the Taxi Cab Authority and the NTA, and other organizations within the state that could, where the benefit could be mutual and go both ways. And that's not to say that I wouldn't prioritize personnel and getting to know each individual, but from an operational perspective, I think that those are probably my top 3 priorities.
Thank you very much. We don't have any other questions at this time. Mr. Cummings, I'll let Administrator Decker give you just a brief thumbnail of where we're headed from here, and then we'll go on to the next agenda item.
Mr. Cummings, J.D. Decker, Interim Administrator for the Taxi Cab Authority. Thank you for interviewing today. Your interview was one of 3. 2 were conducted yesterday. The 2 interviewees from yesterday will have to wait till today. But if they have joined, like you are welcome to stay on to observe the board's deliberations. The board is required by statute to forward 3 names to the Director of Business and Industry, who is ultimately responsible for making a selection to fill the position. The director may re-interview candidates, may not. That would be up to him. But currently, the board will be deliberating, and you are welcome to remain on. However, please do not engage. You'll be observing only.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4 is board deliberation and selection of applicants to be submitted to the Director of Business and Industry pursuant to NRS 706.882, subsection 1 for discussion and action. Before I bring the matter back to the table for the board members, I'm going to open up for any public comment that a member of the public or industry would like to make before we begin the deliberation process. So I'm permitted to do that under the terms of the agenda and the open meeting law. So if any person wishes to address us, unmute, and you may provide comments. We'd like to ask you to limit them to 3 minutes. Is there any such comment? I don't see anybody unmuting, so that'll be taken similarly to if we were in the room together. Nobody's coming to the podium, so I will close any comment. Board members, I would open it up for your discussion. To frame the discussion a little bit better, and since Member Soderberg apparently has a text method of communicating with Administrator Decker, he can, maybe you can speak on his behalf.
I will try.
Or Don, you can email me in the office if you want. Remember,
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
we can hear you now.
Yeah, I got off the line after the questions were being asked and got back on quickly, and it seemed to work. So
Oh, perfect.
I'm on.
Terrific.
But I will not push the button again.
Very good. Glad that you're back with us, Member Soderberg. As you recall, yesterday I indicated we, by statute, as interim Administrator Decker indicated, need to send 3 names. By statute, we have 3 names. The statute does not indicate that we are prohibited from doing more than sending the 3 names. And so I suggested yesterday that members of the board give thought to ranking our 3 candidates in some way to assist the director in focusing his review. So with that, I'm going to open it up and let each of the board members speak their mind, and then I'll try to bring it back and help formulate an action item. And I'll begin with Vice Chairman Thompson.
Well, thank you. I have enjoyed hearing these interviews. My impression is that both Mr. Cummins and Mr. Hassan are very knowledgeable, and it's pretty difficult to tell them apart. I actually liked the first, I believe his name was Brian Albertson. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. He seemed to have less experience in the taxi industries and transportation industries, although he certainly was well qualified. But if I had to rank Hassan and Cummins, I might make Cummins number 1 because I'm not sure why Hassan moved from job to job. He had fairly powerful jobs by his description early on, and he moved to various other places, which were quite good jobs, certainly. But I just don't, I mean, this is a minor quibble, to be perfectly honest. So my final vote would be Cummins number 1, Hassan number 2, and Albertson's number 3, although they're all quite good, if you ask me. And I'm a little uncertain about Cummins because I can't see him. it's surprising that that makes a difference to me, but it to do. So I will, that's my summation. I've taken up enough of your time.
No, thank you, Member Thompson. I'll just share with you that Mr. Cummings' choice of hairdo is very similar to that of our current acting administrator.
He is far better dressed than I am today or was yesterday, and has a better choice of tie.
Well, he's the one then.
Remember,
I take that.
he is in a coat and tie though. Member Rodriguez. Thank you, Member Thompson. Member Rodriguez.
So just to clarify, are you looking for the same format that Member Thompson just gave you as far as the commentary?
I leave open to you, Member Rodriguez, however you would like to provide your thoughts on an action item here, but it would be assistive to me in suggesting a motion for action if you were prepared to rank 1,
Okay.
2, 3.
I am. So
Okay.
I agree with Member Thompson in that Mr. Hassan has had some incredible jobs. He is extremely well spoken, and I think that he was very verbose in his answers. But I don't understand the moving around also. And, you know, different people move for different reasons. So we don't know that answer. But I do enjoy and did enjoy listening to Mr. Cummings' answers as well. They're not as verbose as Mr. Hassan, but I think that he has a really incredible knowledge of the inside of what the Taxi Cab Authority actually is responsible for. And then I would rank Mr. Cummings number 1, Mr. Hassan number 2, and I believe Mr. Albertson to be number 3. I was not very impressed with his lack of preparation. And I felt that although he had some experience, he was really sort of giving us his leadership perspectives from theory and not practice. And he did not know what the job entailed. And he did mention that he had prepared for a couple of days, which in preparation for promotion myself, I know that it has taken me months to do that type of thing. So I would ask him, if I could comment, to really study the position that he's looking for and to know his audience. That's all I have.
Thank you, Member Rodriguez. Very helpful. Member Soderberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, when I've approached this exercise, I think from a board member's perspective, you're looking for leadership, you're looking for those type of things because we are not full-time and this individual will be full-time. But I lean back on my experience in state government. I have hired administrators before. I have been an administrator for a very short time within the Department of Business and Industry, and the current director of the Department of Business and Industry was the deputy director. So I essentially worked for Terry Reynolds for 11 months. When I take those experiences and put them together, I really do believe that Mr. Cummings is heads and tails above the other candidates. I look at his resume. That's the type of resume that I would have looked at here in a Nevada state agency and going, okay, this individual is ready to move up to the next level. The only difference is he did it in Colorado. But I have seen very similar resumes throughout my time at DETR, my time at the Public Utilities Commission, and even my time within the Department of Business and Industry looking to move people up to section heads and like. And so I was very impressed with his resume. He was concise and focused in the answer to his questions. I never expect candidates to nail those questions 100%. Some of them are very theoretical, including the ones that I drafted, but I would have confidence that he could run this agency and he could work for his boss, which is not me. His boss is the director of the department, and would implement the type of administrative policies that the director has been implementing throughout the department. With regard to ranking the other two candidates, I find that very hard. They both seem like nice individuals. I agree with some of the comments from both members Thompson and members Rodriguez. But I really don't see either of those individuals running a division at this point within the state of Nevada. They're clearly, I just look at the amount of time we spent on Mr. Cummings and how nice and concise it was for him to communicate without going on and on and on. And we didn't have that experience yesterday. I was wishing I'd brought snacks. Well, I don't know if I can rank the other two candidates. I don't think either of them are ready to be an administrator in the state of Nevada government framework. Maybe later, you know, they clearly don't seem like there's warts there in my mind, but they're not ready. And if I was in a different position and I looked at these three resumes, clearly it would be the only person I would interview would be Mr. Cummings.
Thank you. Anything else, Member Soderberg?
No, that's it.
Very helpful, especially with your perspective, having been an agency head. So I'll just share my thoughts briefly, because I don't think they materially deviate from the norm here. I found Mr. Cummings on paper and in person to be highly qualified, and I think what distinguishes him, in addition to the other observations made by the fellow board members, is that he has the depth of law enforcement experience that I view as necessary for this position, in addition to knowing how to run a government agency and having expertise in the actual subject matter areas. As with Member Soderberg, I agree that, and I think both members Rodriguez and Thompson also indicated this, Cummings clearly distinguishes himself as the lead candidate. I deviate a little bit from Member Soderberg. Mr. Hassan has experience. He ran a taxi cab authority. He brings some government experience, but he doesn't have the law enforcement component. And some of the work he's done, as others have noticed, it seems like he's moved from company to company or agency to agency quite a bit. I don't know the circumstances of that; they may not be relevant. But I saw him as very knowledgeable about the industry, and so I'm not unconfident. I don't lack confidence that if for some reason Mr. Cummings was not acceptable to the administrator, that Mr. Hassan couldn't do the job, couldn't rise to the occasion. So I would put Mr. Hassan in the second category. And while Mr. Albertson might have been quite pleasant, has some interesting law enforcement experience, he came to law enforcement after having essentially been in sports promotion for universities, and I frankly I did not have confidence, and do not have confidence, that Mr. Albertson's ready to run an agency like the Taxi Cab Authority. So while he's ranked number 3 in my view, it's a distant 3 if I were to have to characterize it. With those deliberations, if there's nothing, any other, I'll give board members a moment if they want to say anything else before I suggest a motion. Hearing none, I will suggest I would entertain a motion that we send pursuant to NRS 706-882 subsection 1, the names of Mr. Cummings, Mr. Hassan, and Mr. Albertson to the administrator, that a majority of the board would rank them in that order, but that there are, as placed on the record, commentary and reservation about both Mr. Hassan and Mr. Albertson. And if somebody's inclined to make that motion, I would appreciate it.
Rodriguez,
So
I'll
moved.
make the motion.
And was that you, Member Soderberg?
Let's
I
remember,
think
we both did.
Rodriguez and I at the same time, so I'll defer to Member Rodriguez.
Okay, I will take a motion for Rodriguez, a second from Soderberg. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Thompson said aye.
I'm going to take roll. Thompson,
Thompson, aye.
Rodriguez, Rodriguez.
It's an aye.
Are you saying aye? Thank you. And Soderberg, I thought that was an aye.
Aye.
Reeser, ayes. It's unanimous. Thank you, Acting Administrator Decker, for your assistance in this matter, and to our applicant interviewees. That concludes agenda item 4. Agenda item 5 is industry discussion. I've not been advised of any matter that needs to come before us on this agenda item. So unless a member of one of my board members has something on industry discussion, we'll consider that matter handled. Anything from a board member? Hearing none, agenda item 6 is public comment. This is time set pursuant to the open meeting law for the board to again consider any comments from members of the public on matters within our jurisdiction. And we may not take action on those items, but would be happy to hear any public comments this time. Don't see anybody unmuting and coming forward. So going once, going twice, going 3 times. I'll close public comment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion
This
to
is Mr.
adjourn?
Thompson. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Member Rodriguez, I'll give you the second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I heard 3 ayes, and I'll be the 4th. We will be adjourned, and thank you very much to staff for your assistance in the technology today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members.